So has anybody in the audience ever tried to change your behavior? Has anybody ever tried to lose weight? Stop smoking? Behavior change is what I'm focused on today. So motivational design is where I started, motivating people to change their behavior. And we used to look at one question over and over again. And that question was why? Why do people do things? And it led me down a path on trying to understand human behavior. Because I started realizing ever since I left academia 20 years ago, what we understand about the human brain has fundamentally changed. I pretty much had to throw out all the 90s psychology which I'd learned, cognitive science, because what neuroscience is telling us today about how our brains work is so interesting and so different to how we've been thinking about the world and our brains that I had to change and come up with a whole different way of motivating people, a design framework which I came up with. Today, I'm going to talk to you about behavior change. How do you change people's behavior? Never mind, even when they've decided to change their behavior, why is it so hard? Why is losing weight hard? Why is giving up smoking hard? What are these things which get in our way? And as we think about it as people who deal in the world of conversions, there's a really interesting challenge which we're trying to overcome. Why am I here at a conversion conference? We talked about it a little before, was this idea of mobile conversions, right? What we call is consumers are out in the wild. I live in the future. We live with technologies. We've been looking at augmented displays for 5-6 years now. We've been looking at gesture-based systems a long time before Kinect came out. We've been looking at how you interact with smart objects. What this leads us to is a whole messy world of when humans touch technology. And converting behaviors in the real world is really hard. It comes down to really trying to understand how and why people do certain things to work out how you can actually move and change their behavior. So what is conversion as we think about it from behavior change? We call it the ultimate behavior change. You know, moving somebody from browsing to shopping, shopping to buying, buying to engaging, engaging to promoting, telling other people about it. These are all conversion points. They're all big behavior changes, but they all have something in common with understanding why behavior change is hard for humans and the different systems in our brain which actually come into play and how they interact together. We've got multiple decision systems in our brain, and they all evolved over different periods of time, and they actually conflict. And these are those conflicts which are causing half of our problems when it comes to behavior change. I moved away from the world of analytics and data and big data and behavioral targeting to a world where I design solutions to engage people. You might have heard of gamification. Big buzzword, it's been talked about for many years. Using the concepts from game design, what game designers have been doing for years, which is motivating people to change their behavior. We talk about it, but motivating people to do things. But what we understand about the brain today blows away everything game designers have been doing. My work in motivational design is now going back into the game design community because they realize all the 90s psychologies they've been using, all Skinner's rats, and all those assumptions they made about how behavior works in our brain is actually wrong. So it's a vast subject, but I'm going to talk to you about the different systems in our brain, some key patterns, and I'm going to focus on 2 different behavior changes to give you an example of how it works. So flossing. This is a personal story. I've got 4.5-year-old twins. 4.5 years ago, we had beautiful twins. It changed my world. It changed our lives. If anybody's had twins, does anybody have multiples, by the way? So somebody who's had children probably understands how of a big impact a child has on you. Multiples multiplies that by a factor beyond just 2 or 3. I don't know how many multiples you have. The interesting thing when you have 2 is sleep patterns are thrown out the window. So we went through survival mode for months. We had one child who only slept for 2 hours at a time. Now, the other one slept on a very different schedule, which led to a number of different behavior changes for me and my wife. You know, I gave up shaving for a long time. Flossing went out the window. We just were in survival mode. The interesting thing is, as the kids grow, you want to bring some of those things back. I'm going to tell you the story of how hard it was to bring flossing back into my usual schedule. The next one is a little bit more interesting. It's some research we did for a grocery store. And it actually came down to a number of different areas, but came down to 50% of all shopping trips are for 5 or fewer items. Most grocery stores are designed for stock-up shopping, which is a weekly event. They have like 32,000 different SKUs, which makes it really challenging for when you only want to go in and get that carton of milk. To the point, most people will pay the premium of going to a corner store as opposed to going to their grocery store, even if the grocery store was closer. Our research into this shopping and grocery store is another example of how we started looking at behavior change and how we can get some of those shoppers back into a grocery store. So let me tell you about 3 different parts of your brain, 3 different systems. You might have heard of, cognitive scientists talk about, 2 different systems in your brain. It's actually been broken up into 3 main behavioral systems in your brain of how your brain makes decisions. The deliberative system, the Pavlovian system, and what we're going to call is the automatic system. The deliberative system is something we started calling as the pilot. It's what we believe when we think about rational decision making. It's the one who has to make those decisions, those complex choices. That is the deliberative system. That is consciousness, actually. It's the things which we are conscious about. It's above that line of consciousness. But it's what happens below that line which is fascinating, especially as it comes to behavior change, especially as it comes to those problems which challenge us when we want to change our behavior. The Pavlovian system, it's been called a motivational system. It's what motivational design is actually based upon, is what we call the co-pilot. It's part conscious, part unconscious, and how it works together is a very interesting science behind that. But we're going to focus on the last system, the autopilot, and how the autopilot causes most of the challenges with behavior change in our lives. You might have heard of heuristics and biases, cognitive biases, these things which trip us up when we're trying to make decisions. Habits is another area you might have heard a little bit about. Charles Duhigg talking about the power of habits. How habits work in your brain is fascinating. It changed how we do ethnographic research. It changed how we look at behavior change as we design systems to change people's behaviors. And I'm going to explore a little bit about that. So as you experience the world, information comes at you, and it goes into one of these 3 systems, the pilot, the co-pilot, or the autopilot. And it's based on something fairly simple. Have you seen this before? How familiar is it to your brain? We'll start at the bottom. If this is something you do on a daily basis and you're very familiar, it gets routed to the autopilot. The autopilot takes control of it. Because one of the interesting things about the deliberative system, our rational brain, the thing which we believe makes us human, it's expensive. It takes up a huge amount of energy, and we've evolved, our brain has evolved to try and offload as much out of that deliberative system as possible. So as much as possible can be pushed to that automated system. That autopilot is what it tries to do. Then you've got the system in the middle, which is, I've seen this a few times, I've done it a few times, I've done something similar to it. That goes in the Pavlovian system. And the top system is, I've never seen it before. This is something new. Every time you try something new, you walk into a new place, you go and try and make a new decision about something, that is your deliberative system coming online and trying to make a change. Problem is, even then, if it spots something which it might have seen before, even if you boil down a decision and you come down to 2 choices, if those 2 choices is something which it might have recognized, it could actually trigger a bias, a heuristic, which actually goes into autopilot. So how these 3 systems work together is the fundamental piece behind behavior change. So this idea of this autopilot, the fact that it wants to take control, and a lot of our behaviors eventually get translated to the autopilot, is where we're going to spend some time thinking about it. Autopilot is best described by that experience. You drive to work the same way every day. Saturday, you jump in a car, you're going to the grocery store. If you're not paying attention, you might end up back at work. That is the autopilot. It chunks a huge amount of behaviors, decisions, and even a very complex skill of driving. It's not like your brain's not doing anything. Your brain's doing all that complex skill. The first time you learn driving, you pretty much spend most of your time in the deliberative system and the Pavlovian system. But once you've been doing it for a while and you've been going the same direction for a long time, it's all autopilot. We actually spend about, they say, 47% of every day in autopilot behaviors. Autopilot behaviors isn't just enter the car. Anything you do on a regular basis, log onto your computer, check your email, Facebook, eventually all of these things get pushed down to the autopilot, to an unconscious chunked series of behaviors which you're not aware of it's doing. And that causes us problems. As much as it was designed to be efficient, offloading the cost of using a deliberative system, it causes problems in behavior change because it goes online far more often than we would like it. Behavior change seems simple, right? You're doing A and you do B. You do that constantly, and you want to change it. You want to go to C. It's a very simple model which we look at, but what is standing in the way? So let's get back to flossing. When it came to flossing, I would find myself at the end of my bathroom routine and forgetting flossing, because this is the autopilot in action. And it isn't just, this idea of brushing isn't as simple as we think. It's a lot of physical, chunked behavior which goes into this. Everything from getting your toothbrush out, putting toothpaste on it, all of these things. And the funny thing is, when you do a combined routine like this, there's no differentiation from when brushing your teeth stops and shaving starts in my case. They're all just micro behaviors, micro things which are chunked all down to the autopilot. So I was trying to break this behavioral chain by inserting flossing back into the routine as it should have been. The challenge was the autopilot was getting in the way. So there's a couple of different things from my research which we found are very useful to try and fix this problem. One is called a prepend append. When you've got a chunk series of behaviors, you can actually try and prepend it by doing something before the first cue of that action sequence. Or you can append it. You can do it after the sequence has ended. I actually ended up adding flossing to the end of my shaving routine and repeating the brushing process. That was easier to do than it was to try and insert a behavior in the middle of my brushing routine. I've since learned new techniques, and I probably should revisit it, but at the time, the best thing I found was to add flossing at the end of shaving. But there's other things you can do now. You can change the cue, change your toothbrush, or you can change context. A good time to change behavior on something you do on a daily basis is actually when you're traveling. You're in a hotel room in a very strange bathroom. Some things are similar, some things are different, but enough of it is different if you want to change some of those common behaviors. These are all things which you can do in changing behavior. Okay, so let's put this to a real-world scenario of shopping behavior. So we did a lot of ethnographic research. We went out and interviewed grocery store shoppers and tried to understand a little bit more. It wasn't just good enough to get the survey and the quantitative data. We wanted to get into why people were doing the things they were doing. And we wanted to understand what was going on. Why were people intentionally going to something which is far more expensive, fewer choices, because they wanted to avoid going to the grocery store? This is something called avoidance. This idea of avoiding friction, you might have heard it, less clicks, reduce the friction, all of these things is because what you're trying to do is get people over the hump of something they find is unpleasant. They'll avoid it. They'll do anything they can to avoid this behavior. They might not even be conscious of it at the time they're doing it. In this scenario, they were. They didn't want to go to the grocery store because it forced them. The milk, for example, the milk is actually put intentionally in the far corner from the point of entrance. So you have forced to go through the whole store. It's called navigational angst. Not knowing where something else is caused by, even worse, when you're only trying to buy one or two things. So this idea of friction and reducing friction isn't as simple as we like to believe. We like challenging things. We don't want something to be simple. We were doing this work for the very large tax company, and one of the questions we were talking to the users about was, what happens if we gave you your easy button? It just made it really easy for you to do your taxes. The initial response was, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love an easy button to do my taxes. But then we dug a little bit further. We realized that they didn't trust it. Hang on a minute, but I've got all these little unique things. I've got to expense this. I don't believe your easy button would be able to anticipate all those things. When we realize something is complex, which most things are, we don't want the easy button. We don't want the one click. We want something which makes it easy for us, and it takes into account the things which is unique about us. So it isn't as easy as just reducing friction. We have to actually change behavior in a very different way. So we wanted to change this, and we wanted to look at what was it which was causing all this problem. What was the friction being caused by? It's actually called the fear of uncertainty and ambiguity. When you don't know something. If you're trying to change customer behavior, 99% of it will come down to uncertainty. Anytime your customer is uncertain about what they have to do next, where they have to go, or what's going to happen, that's going to cause friction. That's going to cause behavior change. That's going to cause avoidance. And we had to find a way of trying to get over this. How can we actually make it easier than to do these mini shops inside a large grocery store? So our first thing was actually solve their navigational angst, creating an app which actually shows them the things that they're on their shopping list, how they can find them, how they can quickly get to the key areas of the grocery store to get these stopped and actually get out. We went further than that. We actually created a VIP system which actually gave them how long it's going to take to finish the shop. It took into account how many people were in the checkout line and how many items they had in their cart, because we created a VIP line as part of this design. If somebody knows that something's going to take 10 minutes, they're more likely to do it. And if they know every single place where they have to buy the things they have to get, they're more likely to go there. And this, we were trying to tell them the anticipated time of shopping before they even walked in the grocery store while they were still at home. The other example which the grocery store was interested in is adding a new product. And this comes down to something else called choice angst. You might have heard some of the research, right? If you give somebody too many choices, they actually don't make a decision. They don't change their current behavior. This comes down to a lot of different decisions which we make. You're trying to put something new in front of something, never mind you giving them too many choices, because what happens with something you do on a weekly basis, on a regular basis going to the grocery store? You're in autopilot. You're in unconscious, planned behavior. Your brain isn't even online. So all this talk about product placement, shelf placement, the amount of money which gets spent on trying to get something in somebody's awareness, the fact that they're in autopilot for grocery store shopping is somewhere in the 90% range. Never mind 45% of our day in autopilot, grocery store shopping, you're in 90%, because this is a regular activity and you go and buy the same things, go down the same aisles every single time. So we have to try and break that, try and give somebody a way to get around choice angst and this idea of getting them out of autopilot behavior. So not only did we create this system which actually, if there was a new product, they got told about it as they're creating the shopping list, not when they're in the store, because they'll be in autopilot at that point. When you're planning something ahead, thinking about something ahead or thinking about something in the past, that's all your deliberative brain. That's your conscious, that's your pilot in play. But when you're in the moment, you're down into autopilot and Pavlovian behavior. So there's a number of different patterns which we use when we're trying to change people's behavior. This comes down to some of the things you might have heard about cognitive biases. We've broken down decisions into this framework. You basically want to simplify choices, you want to understand the choices somebody has in front of them, and you want to help them evaluate them. We're going to talk a little bit about two of the patterns here, which is simplified choices. Something called reduce and constrain. This comes from the research. If you put too many options in front of somebody, 40 different kinds of ketchup, they're going to buy the same ketchup they always bought. I don't know if you've heard of this example. This was an online subscription ad which Dan O'Reilly from MIT came across. He actually came across the one with 3 options. So he basically has 3 options. It has an online option for $59 or a print and web for $125, but it also had a middle option of print for only $125. The interesting thing about this ad, Dan O'Reilly realized that there was something strange going on. So he actually ran a test and created one with only 2 choices. When there's only 2 choices, .com or print and web, 68% of the people chose just the .com or the web property. You add that third choice, that middle choice, which, by the way, nobody chose. It flips it to 84% choosing the print and web. What is going on there? Dan O'Reilly calls it relativity. We call it apples to apples. Because what your brain's really good at, one of those heuristics, one of those autopilot things your brain is trying to offload from your deliberative system, is the fact that when it sees something which is comparable, So print subscription, $125. Print and web, $125. Your brain goes, hang on a minute, I'm getting a bargain for the same price. That's a no-brainer. And that goes to your autopilot, and then it goes up to your deliberative system as, hey, I've already chosen an option. Your unconscious has already chosen an option, and it guides you in that direction. To the point we actually rationalize it after the fact that think that we actually made that decision, but the reality is, over multiple experiments they've shown, the brain makes that decision a long time before your conscious deliberative system actually kicks in. So how did we bring this all together in a design? So you're trying to put a new product in place. You've added the product into your shopping list in your app. When you get to the store, what we wanted to do was augmented reality display. You flip it up. It shows you the 3 different products which are comparable, shows you where they are on the shelves, and it even compares them to things which you find important. In this scenario, we looked at a consumer who was energy conscious. So the bulb that they were looking for was going to be rated higher based upon what they found important. So again, it's helping them make decisions. It's helping them. It's allowing them to compare 2 things. Apples to apples. Your brain's good at comparing that. It's not great at comparing apples to oranges. So you want to make it as simple as possible for them to make the right decision based upon everything in front of them. You want to use that deliberative system and the autopilot system in conjunction to allow them to make the right decision for themselves. We looked at prepending the behavior, because one of the things which we were trying to do was get them to the store, which obviously was a decision gets made a long time before they even get to the store. So we actually designed a system for their home where they can actually, based upon the things that they bought, this is based on RFID and a few things which we were playing around with, was it could actually tell you what's in stock at home, keep an inventory, and actually be able to keep track of as you use things and automatically create your shopping list. Because we needed to actually stop that first queue before they actually made the decision to go through the 7-Eleven. We wanted to get them to go to the grocery store ahead of time. So this is an example of prepending. Before they get into autopilot behavior, we want to actually interrupt that behavior ahead of time. So, behavior change, persuasion, motivational design. We're in the world of conversions, right? We have a code of ethics. Pilot, co-pilot, autopilot, understanding that, understanding the motivational system. We look at ourselves as air traffic control. We want to design systems and solutions which put the consumer, the person who's using it, at the center. And we want to do things which are right for them. You want to improve purchase decisions. You want to change behavior. It's not only important to understand why somebody wants to do it and get them to, they actually want to do this, and make it easy for them to do that. We believe in this code of ethics of making sure we act as that air traffic control. We're the people guiding the airplanes down to land. Thank you.